Victoria Hale was not the kind of woman to overlook details. As the CEO of one of Chicago's most powerful real estate firms, she had built her empire by spotting what others missed. On this particular evening, the office was silent, the fluorescent lights above casting long reflections across the polished marble floors. Most of her staff had gone home hours ago, and the building was supposed to be nearly empty except for the overnight cleaning crew. As she gathered her things, Victoria noticed movement from the corner of her eye. Through the glass wall of her office, she saw someone tall, dressed in the green uniform of the janitorial staff, walking briskly down the corridor. She hadn't seen him before. He was new, or maybe brought in through the temp agency. But what caught her attention wasn't his pace or his presence. It was the fact that he kept glancing over his shoulder and appeared to be hiding something under his coat. Something about the way he moved made her instincts flare. He wasn't pushing a cart or carrying cleaning supplies. Instead, he clutched his coat tightly against his side as he reached the stairwell and quickly disappeared through the door. Victoria frowned. Was he stealing something? Maybe electronics from one of the conference rooms. A laptop. The company had dealt with minor thefts before, and while they had security cameras, she didn't like leaving anything to chance. Her gut told her something was off. Without thinking twice, she stepped out of her office and followed. Her high heels echoed softly as she made her way toward the stairwell. She paused at the door and pressed her ear against it. Faint footsteps. He was heading down. She hesitated for a moment, then pushed the door open and followed him, staying far enough behind that he wouldn't notice. As she descended the stairs floor by floor, her mind raced with possibilities. What if he was dangerous? What if he confronted her? But her curiosity was stronger than her fear. This was her building, her people, her responsibility. If someone was stealing from her, she needed to know. But what she didn't realize, what she couldn't possibly know yet, was that the truth waiting at the bottom of those stairs would shatter her assumptions and change her forever. The stairwell was cold and dim, lit only by flickering wall lights that cast long shadows on the concrete steps. Victoria moved quietly, her designer heels now a burden, so she slipped them off and carried them in her hand. She could hear the faint creak of the door below closing slowly, just one flight beneath her. Whoever this janitor was, he was fast, but not fast enough to lose her. She pressed forward, heart pounding, not from fear exactly, but from a strange mix of anxiety and determination. Her mind kept replaying the image of him clutching his coat, sneaking glances behind him like someone with something to hide. When she reached the bottom floor, she found the door slightly ajar. She peeked through the crack and saw the man disappear into a side corridor that led to the back exit of the building. It was a part of the property most executives never walked through, an area used by maintenance crews, delivery services, and the waste management company. Victoria stepped through the door and continued her pursuit, staying in the shadows. The hallway smelled faintly of bleach and oil, and the buzz of an old vending machine filled the silence. The man reached a heavy steel door at the end and pushed it open, exiting into the alley behind the office tower. For a moment, she hesitated. This wasn't like her. She was a CEO, not a security guard. She should have called someone, but something about this felt personal. She needed to see this through. Slipping through the door just as it began to close, she found herself in the alleyway. It was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic and the sound of the janitor's footsteps ahead. He turned sharply into a small enclosure beside the dumpster area. Victoria crept closer and pressed her back to the wall, peering around the corner carefully. What she saw stopped her breath. The man had knelt beside a worn-out cot placed behind a large cardboard divider. A woman, frail and wrapped in blankets, lay sleeping. Gently, he opened his coat, not to reveal stolen goods, but to remove a small bag of food and a thick office jacket. In that moment, everything shifted. The thief she thought she was following wasn't running away. He was returning home. Victoria stood frozen, the chill of the alley biting into her skin, but she didn't feel it. All her focus was on the man in front of her, the janitor she had assumed was a thief. He moved with tenderness, kneeling beside the frail woman on the cot as though the entire world had faded away, and only she remained. He pulled out a container of food, clearly leftovers from the executive lounge, carefully opened it. The steam rose gently into the cool night air as he lifted a spoon and softly stirred it, checking the temperature. Then, with a voice so quiet it barely rose above a whisper, he said, "Mama, I brought dinner. It's still warm. I know it's not much, but they had chicken tonight." The woman stirred, her eyes fluttering open slowly. She looked up at him with a tired, grateful smile. "You're late," she murmured. "I know," he replied, brushing her hair gently back. I had to wait till the last meeting ended. Didn't want to get caught again. Victoria felt her stomach twist. This wasn't just a secret hideout. This was his reality. The alley, the makeshift bedding, his mother. She watched as he took off the heavy office jacket he'd been wearing and placed it over her shoulders, tucking it around her like a blanket. His own shirt sleeves were thin now in the cold, but he didn't seem to care. His focus was entirely on keeping her warm, fed, and safe. "I'll try to find some medicine tomorrow," he said gently. "Maybe the nurse on the 5th floor left something behind. I'll check." Victoria turned her face away, overwhelmed. Everything she had believed just minutes earlier about him, about people like him, collapsed under the weight of the truth. This man wasn't stealing, he was surviving. No more than that, he was sacrificing, working late nights in silence, taking nothing for himself, and giving all he had to the person who mattered most. For the first time in a long while, Victoria felt small, humbled, and she knew she couldn't walk away from this without doing something. This wasn't about company property or security. This was about humanity. The next morning, Victoria sat in her office, the skyline of Chicago stretching out behind her, but her mind was nowhere near the world of contracts and board meetings. She couldn't shake the image of the man in the alley, the tenderness in his voice, the quiet sacrifice etched into every one of his movements. His name was Marcus. She had pulled his file from HR as soon as she arrived. Janitorial contractor, part-time, no benefits, emergency contact field, left blank, no complaints, no incidents, just a name and a shift schedule. He had been invisible in the system until now. Victoria asked her assistant to bring Marcus up to her office. When he arrived, he looked confused, unsure of why the CEO of the company had summoned him. He stood near the doorway, cap in hand, eyes lowered respectfully. "Marcus," she said gently, gesturing to a chair. "Please, sit." He hesitated, then sat on the edge, clearly nervous. "I saw you last night," she said quietly. His eyes widened, and for a moment he looked ready to defend himself, but Victoria raised her hand calmly. "No, I didn't follow you to get you in trouble. I followed you because I thought you were stealing. I was wrong." Marcus looked down, silent. "I saw your mother," she continued, "and I saw how you care for her. I also saw the weight you carry alone." There was a long pause before Marcus finally spoke, his voice low and steady. "I never meant to deceive anyone. I just couldn't afford help. She got sick last year. I lost my other job trying to be with her more. This pays just enough to keep her fed. But rent, medicine, heat, it's too much." Victoria swallowed hard, fighting the sting in her chest. "You shouldn't have to choose between dignity and survival," she said. "What you did last night, it wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was an act of love most people wouldn't understand." He didn't respond, but the way his shoulders trembled slightly said everything. That day Victoria made two decisions. The first, Marcus would be offered a full-time job with benefits and a safe place to live. The second, his story would not be forgotten. Not by her, not by anyone. 2 weeks later, a crowd gathered outside a freshly renovated building on the city's south side. It was modest but bright, painted in warm colors, with a new sign over the door that read, "The Evelyn Center for Caregivers." Victoria stood beside Marcus as reporters snapped photos and neighbors clapped. The ribbon cutting was minutes away, but she couldn't take her eyes off the expression on his face, part disbelief, part pride, and a quiet kind of gratitude that didn't need words. The center was her idea, but the heart behind it was his. A place for people like Marcus, working-class caregivers stretched thin by life, but full of love. It offered food, warmth, medical assistance, and job placement support. It was more than charity, it was dignity. As the crowd quieted, Victoria stepped up to the microphone. Her voice, so often commanding in boardrooms, now trembled with something softer. 2 weeks ago, I made a mistake," she began. "I judged a man without knowing his story. I followed him, thinking he was taking something that didn't belong to him. What I discovered instead was a son caring for his mother the best way he knew how, quietly, humbly, and with more strength than I can describe." She turned to Marcus. He stood tall in his new uniform, no longer the invisible man pushing a mop down quiet hallways. "I want to thank Marcus for showing me something I had forgotten in all the noise of business and success," she said. "That humanity is not measured by what we earn, but by how we care for others, and that sometimes the people who seem to have the least are the ones who give the most." The ribbon was cut, and the doors opened. Children ran in first, followed by mothers, grandfathers, nurses off duty, and workers on break. A warm meal waited inside, so did warmth of another kind. Marcus stood beside Victoria and looked toward the small plaque by the door. It read, "In honor of Evelyn Davis, whose son taught us what love really means." He turned to her and said quietly, "You didn't have to do all this." Victoria smiled. "I didn't, but I wanted to. You gave me something I didn't know I needed." In that moment, 2 lives changed, but so did many others. And for everyone there that day, hope didn't just feel possible, it felt real, and it all began with a mistake that turned into something beautiful.